I am no longer a Christian, and for those of you who know me and don't know that about me, that's probably a shock. And so I just wanted to make this video to explain why I haven't really told people that I'm not a Christian and also why I'm no longer a Christian. So the first thing of why I haven't really told people that I'm not a Christian is, well, one reason is that it's just kind of weird to go up to somebody and say, "Hey, guess what? I'm no longer a Christian." And so I suppose that the lack of religious talking is one reason that I haven't really told many people that I'm no longer a Christian. But I would say that the main reason that I haven't told people I'm no longer a Christian is because I feared the judgment that would come with telling people that I'm no longer a Christian. And, I just feared that people would think differently about me. And I feared that I would get really bad responses and people wouldn't want me to be in their lives or whatever. And I would say another reason is a lot of the people in my life are Christian, and I just don't want to deal with the ramifications of telling people that I'm no longer a Christian who are Christian, because I just don't want to deal with I'm so sad that you're no longer a Christian, you're going to hell, I'm so disappointed, I'm praying for you. And look, don't get me wrong, I know that these are the ways that people feel as though they're loving me the best that they can, and I understand that from that perspective. But for me, it translates to, I'm sad, I'm praying for you. These are things that translate to me as there's something wrong with you, and you're in a bad spot, you're not where you should be, and I'm perfectly content with my beliefs and who I am. And so it just feels like people aren't loving me where I am, and I just really don't want to deal with all of that. Is probably the largest reason of why I haven't really told people I am no longer a Christian anymore. And so there have been people through my deconstruction, which took place over about 3 years, who were there with me the entire time. And I want you guys to know, you who are watching this video, who were there with me in my deconstruction and loved me every step of the way, I appreciate you so much. I love you. Thank you for being there for me and loving me through all of it. So now I want to get into why I'm no longer a Christian, but first I want to kind of preface this whole thing with I was very, very much a Christian, for those of you who know me. In high school, I was a fundamentalist Christian. I believed that the Bible was inerrant. I believed in every single word. I believed everything was literal. I believed in a young earth. I was a young earth creationist, and I would write scientific article reviews for my independent chemistry class and my physics class, defending the science of young earth. I would write papers in my English class defending the historical accuracies of the Bible. And then my senior year of high school, I was basically the youth minister at my church. Our youth minister had left, and I started me and a group of people started an event called Friday Night Unite, where I would lead and teach, and we ended up having 30 to 40 people like every Friday, and over 100 people had come to our little town's youth event, where I led and taught and organized lessons and helped small groups and talked to people about Jesus. And then I was volunteering at middle school camps over the summer, and it was there that I felt like God was calling me to become a pastor. And so I called up the school that I planned on going to and said, "Hey, I'm changing my major to pastoral ministry," and that's where I was. And I say all of that to say that, yes, I was very much deeply a Christian before, and when I got to school, I started studying the Bible. And I've studied the Bible and philosophy and science for the past 3 years. I've taken Hebrew for 2 years. We took 1 year learning the language. The second year, we spent the entire time in the Old Testament, reading it and translating it in Hebrew, talking about the different manuscripts, the grammatical problems. And I've taken classes all the way from ancient Jewish thought all the way up to postmodern philosophy and everything in between there, early church fathers, Enlightenment theology, medieval theology. And so I just want to say that I don't feel qualified to speak about these things because of things that I've discovered, but I do feel qualified to speak about the things that other people have discovered and all of those things that led me to my deconstruction. All right, so now I want to get into it and talk about the different things that have led to my deconstruction from being a Christian. And I want to say that I am an atheist now. And by atheism, I do not mean that I'm asserting that there is no God. By atheism, I mean that I do not believe in the claim that there is a God. And so I'm not claiming that there is or isn't a God. I'm just saying I don't believe in either claim, and therefore I'm an atheist. I'm not a theist. The first thing that started leading me down my path of deconstruction was learning about the science of evolution. And it was here that I realized that evolution is pretty well indisputable. I started reading books about it. I started reading scientific papers. I started watching YouTube videos about the theory of evolution, and the evidence to support it is just immeasurable, and it is a theory, which means that it has been proven over and over and over again. And that led me to realize that Genesis is not literal. There's no way to take Genesis as being literal and synthesize that with the theory of evolution, because obviously the account in Genesis says that Adam and Eve were created, which was two people. And then I started to think about the science of Genesis and Noah's flood and Adam and Eve, and looking at DNA evidence and the fossil record and evidence of a global flood. And I just saw that the evidence was lacking for that. And so I just saw that there was no way for Genesis to be taken as a literal account. And, and I don't care how it's intended. People debate over if it's historical or poetry. And if it's historical, then it's just wrong. And if it's poetry, then there's some use for it, I guess. If you can abstract some ideas out of it that could possibly be useful. Another reason that led me to my deconstruction is the problem of evil in theology. And I spent a lot of time trying to look at different theologies and how they solved this problem of evil. And I found out that there's no real way to solve the problem of evil. No matter how you look at the issue, evil always falls back on God, and it's always God's fault, because God is the creator is supposedly the creator of the universe. God created the bounds of the universe. And so all you can really try to do is justify why God allows evil. And I just don't see that there's any good reason to justify God allowing evil, because it was really easy to justify when I would look at my own life and say, okay, I live in America where I don't have to deal with a lot of hardships. The worst thing I've had happen in my life is probably losing family members to death. And but then I started to think about little girls in third world countries who are trapped in sex trafficking, and 8, 9, 10, whatever age. Sex trafficking is horrible, no matter what age or no matter what. But just thinking about little girls who are drugged and grown men come in and have sex with them every day, and huge problems of evil like that, and just pondering, why would God create a world where that's possible? And, how could God just sit back and allow this to happen? So, you run into that problem of God is either all good or all powerful. I can't remember the name of the issue, but it's basically, if God is all powerful and he refuses to stop evil, then God is not good. If God is all good and can't stop evil, then God is not all powerful. And so you run into issues like that. And basically, I just found that there's really no way to build a philosophically sound version of God. And I know that people say, well, we can't understand God. You can't build your own framework. You have to just let God be who he is. But then I just see that as a cop-out, because if we can't even understand who God is, then there's no point in even having a discussion about God or thinking that we can know God in any perceivable way. And so I just didn't really see that as a good response. A third reason of why I deconstructed in my faith is because I realized that the Bible is not really that special of a book. As I said, I studied Hebrew for 2 years, and the second year we did nothing but read the Bible in Hebrew. And you can look at the different manuscripts that we have. We have the Sumerian Pentateuch, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Masoretic texts, and the thing is, they say different things. They have different words in different spots. They have different grammatical constructions in different spots. And so, you can try to say, oh, well, the text is 99% accurate or whatever you want to try to say. But that means that the Bible is errant. The Bible does contain errors. It is not the inerrant word of God. And this created a major issue for me, because if the Bible has errors, how do we know what's true and what's not true? The Bible has historical inaccuracies. It has grammatical problems. We see the authors of the Bible manipulating the text to fit the narrative that they want to fit. And this is in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament. You read, for example, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, then you go to 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and it's supposed to be the same account of the same events, but they're manipulated and twisted, and ideas are different across the different accounts there. And you look at the Gospels, and there was at least one early church father who tried to combine the Gospels into one coherent gospel, but he just couldn't do it because the Gospels are contradictory and don't make sense, and they don't follow a historical timeline, which shows that these people either wrote down the account inaccurately or purposely manipulated the text. And both of those things are really bad, because when you start asking questions like, how can an all-knowing, all-powerful God let the book that is supposed to reveal who he is become manipulated and contain errors? How can we trust that God or believe that God is all-powerful or all-knowing? And you even run into that problem with the original language. So Hebrew was a dead language for quite a while, and then linguistic people ended up reviving the language. But the issue is that we can't go back and know what was truly intended to be said in the Old Testament and the Hebrew there. They use metaphors and similes and things that we just can't quite understand. So then the question becomes, well, why did the all-powerful, all-knowing God of the universe not preserve the text that's supposed to reveal his plan and who he is and all of this? And then you can even look at how the Bible is similar to texts around the culture that was written around a similar time, or even written earlier than the Bible. And it seems like the Bible is just really another text that was written in its time that was very similar to the cultures around it, and that there's really nothing special about it, because there's errors, there's historical inaccuracies, people manipulating the text, and it's really no different than the other texts written at the time that the Bible was written. Another part of my deconstruction was looking at morals. And Christians try to argue for an objective morality because they have the Bible and they believe God gives the foundation to objective morality. But the problem is that if objective morality existed, then the Bible would be incorrect and God would not exist. Because if you look at the morals of the Old Testament, they are very different from the morals of the New Testament. And even if you look at early writings of the Old Testament, they're different than the morals of the later writings in the Old Testament. So if you read the laws in Exodus and then go and read the laws in Deuteronomy, you have different laws because you have different time periods and different cultures, and the laws just adjusted to the new cultures. There doesn't seem to be any objective nature to it. And not only that, if there is an objective morality and what was said and done in the New Testament is true, then that is not a God that I would want to worship, even if that God did exist, because the God of the Old Testament tells the Israelites to go and commit genocide and kill all these people. It tells the Israelites that they are allowed to own people as property and as slaves, and even beat them to the point where as long as they survive, it's okay, you can beat them. It has nasty things like go and kill all the men in this village. You can take the women for yourself, let them mourn for a little bit, and then if you realize you still like them after they're done mourning for their lost dead ones, you can keep them and you can marry them. Or if you don't like them, you can just kick them out and let them go. And just nasty, horrible things like that. You know, genocide, owning people as property. How can that God be the same as Jesus? You know, so either the Old Testament is wrong or God is a maniac. And I know that Christians are going to try to justify the Old Testament and say we don't believe that anymore, or I don't really know how to get around that issue. But see, Christians have just as much of a problem with secular people when it comes to objective morality, because there is no objective morality in the Bible, and you know, there's no foundation for morals unless you just try to say God said so, which divine command theory is a horrible theory. Another reason for my deconstruction is that there is no philosophical argument for the justification of the existence of God, and all of the arguments just don't hold up in my eyes. For example, the design argument with the watch analogy, people who argue that the universe started, and so therefore there had to be some starter. The issue with that is that there's no reason to assume that the starter was Yahweh or Allah or a group of fairies, or that we're living in a simulation, or, you know, there's just no justification for which one to choose there. And so, you know, that's something I'm going to cover in later videos, is critiquing these philosophical arguments for the existence of God, because I just don't think that they hold any weight. Another reason for my deconstruction is the problem of salvation and never being able to know exactly who God is. So there are thousands of different denominations in the Christian religion alone, which means thousands of different interpretations of who God is. And the problem is none of them can be proved to be objectively right. We can't 100% prove that these different denominations are correct. And I started to think about different issues about salvation and the characteristics of God in a way of, okay, let's say you have a Christian who their conception of Yahweh is very similar to the Orthodox conception of who Allah is, but they claim to be a Christian and follow Jesus. And then you have a Muslim who their conception of Allah is very similar to the Orthodox interpretation of Yahweh. And so here you have a self-proclaimed Christian who is worshiping a being that is supposedly that is very similar to Allah, and then you have a professed Muslim who is worshiping a being that he or she professes to be very similar to Yahweh. And I started to wonder, you know, are the characteristics important here? And I would say that yes, characteristics are important, because if I had completely different characteristics, if I looked completely different, if I had a completely different personality, and I showed up and I walked up to you and started talking to you, you would not think I'm the same person. I would be a totally different person if my characteristics changed. And so I think that characteristics are very important in knowing who somebody is. And so the fact that we can't know the characteristics of God means we can't really know who God is, and this creates a problem with salvation, because, you know, does this Muslim get to go to heaven in the Christian thought because they worship a being that is very similar to Yahweh, even though they give it a different name? And so that just creates a salvation issue across different religions, and you know, this is just another one of the reasons of the complications of this religious theistic framework. So I'm going to give one more point here, and I'm going to stop with this because I can go on and on and on, and this video is going to get really long. I'm going to create videos in the future that will address a lot of these topics more in depth. And this last one I want to talk about is faith. The foundation to every single religion is faith, right? Everybody says you just got to have faith and you'll know who God is. Just have faith, just have faith. And the problem is that faith is a belief without evidence. And therefore, you can have faith in anything if you see faith as a reliable path to truth. And if you just believe something off faith and the fact that it has no evidence, then I can believe whatever I want to off of faith. And therefore, there's no good reason to believe Islam over Judaism or Judaism over Christianity, because they're all focused on faith. All of them say just have faith, and there's no justification for having one belief over the other. If you've made it this far, I just want to say that this is a personal testimony of mine, and so this is not a video that I necessarily want to argue over or have people try to convince me to come back to Christianity or whatever. This is a video of just sharing where I'm at and why I'm there, and future videos that I will make will be for arguing and for debating, and so I look forward to the comments and the discussions that come about. If you know me and you want to talk about this further, feel free to message me on social media, text me or whatever, and I'll get back to you. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, again, subscribe, like the video. I appreciate the love and support on the first video. You guys are awesome. And thanks for watching. We'll see you later.